The order, please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh my God. Can I, welcome to our, excuse me, November 9th Tiverton School Committee meeting. Is there anyone on for, okay. Can I just borrow your agenda for a second? I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'd like to pull off the minutes, please.
Okay. With the exception of the minutes, can I ask for an agenda, or ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed? All right. You wanted to make some corrections? Or?
Yep, I just had some corrections. Under 6, old business, A, the unencumbered capital amount was $682,500. Under, keep going, motion failed, again, unencumbered amount was $682,500.
Right.
That motion passed, and then the second motion really should just read, if requests are denied by the council, that the unencumbered amount for capital improvements be earmarked for bathroom renovations. So really just cross out anything between earmarked and for bathroom renovations. That's it.
Okay. Excuse me.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Any opposed? All right. I'll take that as unanimous. All right. Item 6A, new business, THS National School Development Council Award for Academic Growth and Student Achievement. Dr. Sanquioni?
Do you need to do the enrollment correspondence first? It was, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's, one of my favorite school committee meetings of the year, so we get to distribute this award. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the award, then I'm going to call upon Principal Craven to tell you about our award winners. So it's the National School Development Council Award, and it's presented annually to 2 seniors for 2 criteria: academic excellence and demonstrated leadership. The award is given to high school seniors throughout New England. The award is designed to be presented in the fall, as the timing of the award is to coincide with the time of year when seniors are applying to colleges. As the award is presented on a wide-scale level to almost every high school in New England, college admissions officers recognize the award as a mark of distinction. To tell you about our award winners, I call upon Principal Craven.
Welcome. Thank you, members of the committee.
Yeah,
And
nice.
Dr. Sanquioni, I know it feels a little strange to be here in person, it really does. So we have 2 distinctions to give out this evening. 2 well-deserving students who have exemplified the characteristics that Dr. Sanquioni just described. So our first honor goes to Ryan Snell. Ryan is an exemplary student. He's done amazing things at Tiverton High School. Many of you recognize Ryan from his leadership in the marching band. He's out there at every game. So Ryan, why don't you come on up and accept this award? And congratulations to you. And the second individual who's getting the award this evening is Grace Peckham. Grace, why don't you come on up and accept this award, please? So Grace has done some amazing community service throughout the school. Her leadership, her academics, they are stellar. And we can't recognize her enough for what she does for Tiverton High School and how she's a role model for so many other students. So congratulations, Grace. Thank you.
Okay. Well done, Ryan and Grace. Congratulations, and I'm sure we'll see you up in lights and hear of your amazing accomplishments in the future. So congratulations, and thank you for all you do. Next is item 6B, cybersecurity presentation. Mr. Carnavale?
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. Just pulling up the screen here so I can share my slides up with everyone. Okay. So, from the last meeting we spoke, I was going over some of the goals for the technology department for myself, and one of the goals was cybersecurity. So what I'd like to do, oh wow, the screen share is not great. Let me fix that here. There we go, that's much better. Okay, so I wanted to go over some information about cybersecurity. So as everybody was aware, October was National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And that is something that we're really trying to pay close attention to in the schools because there's been a lot of incidents throughout the country where these cyber criminals are actually preying on schools. They're holding schools' data ransom. They're double ransoming some information and stuff like that. And we want to really kind of keep a close eye on it. So during the month of October, what we did do is each week CISA had put out some information in regards to what we should be going over with everyone. So week 1 was be cyber smart. Week 2 was fight the fish. Week 3 was explore, experience, share. And week 4 was cybersecurity first. So during week 1, we kind of sent out a message to all the staff and just gave everybody a heads up of some things that they should be mindful of. So the first thing, and this is probably one of the most important things about cybersecurity, and this is something that you should take home with yourself, this is not only for work, but this is personal, is multi-factor authentication. That's when you go and log into a website and it goes, is this your cell phone number, the last 4, and it sends you a code and you have to log in with that code. So that's multi-factor. It gives you 2 ways of signing in, not only your password, but it also uses a mobile device or even an email that sends to you and gets you a code. Protecting your digital home. Now this is something that's really interesting and a lot of people are going with like Ring doorbells and thermostats that are smart and everything. And one thing that's really happening a lot is people don't change the default passwords on these devices. So you get people driving down the street, they see your device, they log in and they turn your heat off or they turn your heat up. So you want to make sure that you're changing the passwords on anything that you're buying for your home that's digital. Creating a password, of course, you're going to see the word creating a password. You want to create something that is good for you, but something that's not easily guessed. And you want to make sure that you don't have just one password for everything, because that's the worst thing, because if you get that one out, then everybody's got it. And social media cybersecurity is something else that we talked about. And a funny story is you go onto Facebook and everybody goes, oh, I'm in Florida this weekend. Well, great. Now I know you're not home. I can come into your house and take your stuff. So those are things that you want to be cyber smart about. You don't want to put that stuff out there. Week 2 was fight the fish. Now this was something, Diane, you had mentioned to me that you were able to catch a fish when I was fishing the staff. So what I wanted to do with this slide here is just kind of go over how to spot a phishing scam. This email was actually an email that was sent to the staff as well as the committee. And you'll see in that little red box there, it says no reply at gmailmessage.com via amazonas.com. So when you look at this information here, you're seeing some really weird stuff that's on there. And it's on the screen right off the bat. You see in yellow, it says report phishing. We did very well with this. A lot of people saw that come through and people caught it, sent me messages, and we took care of things like that. The body of the message, you can see that's what went out. Someone has your password. So we were trying to trigger people to instantly come on to us and say, hey, something's wrong. Somebody's got my password. And I had a lot of people reach out to me, and on the committee as well reached out to me saying, I think something's going on. And it was nice because that was the whole test, was to see if you were mindful of what you're getting in your email box. And it went over very, very well. People did hate me after, but again, it went over pretty good. The explore, experience, and share. This is kind of going over what happened over the past couple of weeks, sharing some experiences with everyone. just kind of going over some personal experiences that you may have had, people that have had information stolen from them. So we kind of went over stuff like that there, and what to do if something happens. So in the case of the school, we call the state police and we call Homeland Security. So if something happens, that's the steps that we take here. But it's what you would do for yourself. There is a cybersecurity at the state police that if you get personally hit, that's where you go. So we kind of went over some of that information. And then cybersecurity first. So we did meet with Homeland Security to review the district safety protocols. And the big topic of conversation was discussing the ways to minimize risk in the school. How can we prevent this from happening? So we went over a lot of that information, and that did include updating our virus protection to a cloud-based instead of an in-house based, which was completed. And we did a lot of little random tests on how the network looks, if it's safe, if we're blocking the correct things, and everything went very, very well. So we actually did a pretty good job here, which is where we want to be. We want to be minimizing as much risk as possible. And the last slide I wanted to show you here is, we had talked about this earlier, back a couple of weeks back, is the Rhode Island Student Data Privacy Consortium. So it includes Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. And the 3 states together combined, we basically, if there's software that the school districts would be using, we send it off to this group and they check if it's safe. They also talk with the software vendor and see if there's ways that they would sign off that they're going to protect the students' data. And if something happens, what they're going to do to respond to that, and that it's their responsibility to protect our student stuff and keep our students' information safe. The link that you see in there, which has been sent out to the staff, is a listing of all of Tiverton's software that has been approved by this consortium. And we've been working very well with them, and we learn new things every day, which is great. They constantly keep us in communication. And there are 22 other consortiums throughout the country, and we do combine forces every so often when there's certain softwares that we could be having problems with or suspect, and they really want to vet it out a little bit more. So that's what I have for the presentation today. And if anybody has any questions at all, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Carnevale. I'll open the floor to questions from the committee. Ms. Farnworth?
Thanks, David. It was a well-done presentation. With regard, just a couple of things. You made reference to Facebook, and something came to mind that I just wanted to confirm with you, because I see this fairly regularly. A lot of Facebook pages, sites are out there actively asking people for things like, oh, I don't know, what was the year of your first car? Do you have anything to offer to us, to the general public, about responding to those types of surveys?
Yeah, the best thing is, if you don't know who it is, don't answer it. So one great thing, quick story in regards to that, there was a company, they were a news crew, and they were out on the streets, and it was during October, it was actually a couple weeks ago. They were interviewing people going, how many passwords do you have? And they were getting people on the street going, oh, I have 3, I have 4 passwords. Oh yeah, what's your best one? Oh, my best one's about the school I graduated from and the year I graduated. Oh my goodness, that's ridiculous. You know, I went to Wilton High School. Where did you go? Oh, I went to Johnston High School. Oh my goodness, I graduated in '94. What year did you graduate? '96. Bang, they just got the password. Just random questions. And like you just said with Facebook, they ask those questions in Facebook and you answer them, and you're messing yourself over with that. But they instantly pulled it out. It's the typical Penn and Teller, how they read your mind. It's like a magic trick, but they got the girl to say her password. So that is something. If you don't know who they are, if it's not a reputable company, don't do it.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. The other question I have is with regard to password changes.
Mm-hmm.
At least for us on the school committee, there is no requirement to change them on any kind of regular basis. Is that a district-wide thing? And if so, why aren't we changing passwords on a regular basis?
So all the passwords are stored in a program called Active Directory. and that is stored in-house in the system here. And the only way to reset the password is to be in our office physically.
Don't you
to-
think
to
that's
do
a
that.
risk?
It is a little bit of a risk, but we do get warnings anytime a password is used outside of the realm of Tiverton schools. If an IP address shows up that's not correct, then we can contact the person. We are looking at ways to switch over to a different form of storage for passwords, and once we do that, then we'll be able to allow you to change your password at will.
I would highly recommend that. I think that, any number of applications we all use today occasionally require a password change, be it 90 days, 6 months, whatever. And it really is to provide additional levels of safety for the users. So I would strongly recommend you consider that.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
Does that actually add to the security? I guess intuitively I would think it would, but is there data that says that changing your password, as we,
The
like
major
lemmings, always do?
Yeah, the major downside to password changes is you forget, and you're
Yes,
stuck with,
that is
and you usually change it
definitely the
the
major
first
side.
time you change it to something, then second time you change it back to what the first one was, and then you put in restrictions that you can't use the same password 3 times or something. Another story about passwords was there's a chat program called Slack. I don't know if you've seen commercials for that. They've been playing a lot more during the football games. Slack is a communication tool that a lot of development companies use with the staff that's at home. And it's so easy to emulate somebody in Slack to pretend that you're that person. And they were getting passwords from the IT departments at these big companies and getting in because they were like, oh, I put in a ticket, but it didn't come through. And they believed that they were that person. So there isn't really any data about changing it every 30, 60, 90. It's still a good practice to do something like that and to put that into place, though.
Okay, thanks. I guess I'll keep on doing it. Well, I have no choice, obviously, but, Mrs. Palish?
All set, thank you.
Mrs. Pavo?
Have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Dakotas?
I contacted you, so I passed the test.
You did, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I just deleted.
Which is another great thing to do, yes.
It is a great thing to do, actually. Do it every day. I just start deleting emails. Any questions from any of our community and present in the room? And any questions from any of our administrators on? There's Mrs. Donnelly Roach. Hi. Any questions? Oh, there they are.
We don't have any questions in Zoom land right now, Dr. Larkin.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, item 6C, I guess I'm up. Update on COVID rates, vaccination testing, and vaccinations and test and stay program. So I wanted to do this because we had talked a little bit a few weeks ago about a test and stay program, and I had been trying to find out from the Department of Health and from the Department of Education exactly what might be permissible. And so I have a little bit of an update on that. And then as the vaccines are now approved under an emergency use authorization for our 5 to 11-year-olds and have been for some time for 12 to 16 and actually licensed for 16 and over, I thought I'd at least give an opportunity for people to ask questions and maybe sort of learn a little bit about this stuff. I'm happy to come if anybody is watching in the future or currently. I'm happy to come to any other forum and try and answer questions and explain things as well as I can. And I will try and keep to a 15 or 20-minute timeline here, but we'll see. So next slide, Dave. So to date, there's been about 1.9 million cases in children aged 5 to 11. And I wanted to break out that specific age group because that's, I think, where people are kind of starting to wonder and make decisions about whether they'll have their children vaccinated. And there's actually been 94 deaths in that age group. And that's going from March to 2020 when the pandemic started to a few weeks ago. And then there's this thing called multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which can be a pretty severe illness. And there's been about 2,300 cases in this age group. And then if you go to the next slide, actually, if we look at, just next slide, if we look at the total age group that we're talking about of 5 to 12 years old, there's actually been about 6 million cases, and we see a significantly higher number of deaths, so 558, and this was as of sometime in mid-October. So there's really a significant burden of disease, actually much greater than was seen in similar sorts of vaccine-preventable diseases in the years up to the adoption of vaccines for those illnesses. So next slide. And what you can see here is the red line on the bottom is the illness cases by age in Rhode Island. So you can see it parallels these gigantic spikes that we saw in sort of the spring of 2020, and then another big series of spikes around Thanksgiving, Christmas, and January of last year. And we had another spike when kids were coming back to school this fall, and when the Delta variant became more prevalent. It actually peaked earlier than was predicted by most models. So next spike, or next spike. So what is Test and Stay? This is a program where you that is for students who have been exposed but are not showing any symptoms of COVID infection. And it's based on the fact that transmission is very unlikely in a school setting with other precautions in place. What does that mean? So when you are mask on mask, as we are all now, if you engage in social distancing, and then you have the ongoing monitoring by teachers, nurses, parents of compliance with the masking and social distancing, virtually no transmission occurs. There's very good data, some studies out of North Carolina, and that's been actually our experience in Tiverton. We have had no cases, at least to date that I'm aware of, that have been linked to exposure in school. So that means that transmission is really low, and we even saw this before we went into lockdown in 2020, that for reasons which still are not really understood, there was very little transmission, even in an uncontrolled school setting. At that point, it probably had something to do with the fact that children were both less susceptible and actually were less likely to spread a lot of virus. Of course, with the Delta virus, that's very different. Next slide. What it means is that the child remains asymptomatic through the 10 days following exposure. They wear a mask while they're in school at all times, other when eating or drinking or at outside activity. And they continue to maintain at least 3 feet of separation, and then they take a PCR test daily for the 5 school days following exposure and receive a negative result from each test. It's the 5 school days so that you actually are mimicking what is standard quarantine practice of 7 days. So if you get exposed on Monday, you start on Tuesday. So you go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There's 2 days of the weekend you're not testing, but you're kind of continuing your quarantine period. And then on Monday, you're at day 7, you have your 5th test. That's negative, you're good to go. It's very unlikely that you have acquired COVID. This gets you out of in-home quarantine. That's the whole point. So that's why it's test and stay. You do ongoing testing over the course of 7 days or 5 school days. You maintain the social distance and the masking, and you're in school. And that is probably the most important intervention we can make to actually try and mitigate the learning losses which you've all already experienced. And that's actually one of the things that we have been very successful so far as a district, is being in school. This is a way to make sure that more kids can be in school who have been exposed. And then parents are asked to conduct an active monitoring for symptoms through the day 14 and self-isolate home if any symptoms develop. So there's ongoing monitoring by the parents and for older children by the children themselves. So next slide. So then we come to the executive order. So when I was speaking with the Department of Health and RIDE, we were basically boxed in by the fact that by the executive order that Governor McKee had issued, I want to say in early September, there was no room for a test and stay program. And the test and stay had actually been studied in a large cohort in England and was published in The Lancet. That's sort of where the idea came from. And that it's been used very successfully in a number of states, including Massachusetts, Illinois, North Carolina, Kentucky, and some others. So I was probably about an hour and a half ago, I went and I sort of wanted to look at the order again, because I wanted to go through why it is saying this, and I was met with some surprises, and part of the reason I was late was because I was talking to somebody at the Department of Health, and it does appear that there is now room for a test and stay program to be implemented in Rhode Island, but I am not completely clear on the details yet. And I don't know if you've heard anything, but you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So next slide. So this is part of the whereas parts of the executive order that was issued on the 26th. And it says that, the CDC has provided guidance on a test and stay program that enables students and staff identified as close contacts to remain in school. And next slide. No, actually, next slide. And next slide. Trying to get to the next slide. This is why people don't read them. I know. Yeah, okay. So the person is a student or, so one of the exceptions to quarantine is if the person is a student or staff at a Rhode Island school, such school has entered into an agreement with the Rhode Island Department of Health to implement a test and stay program, and such student or staff consents to the participation in and meets the requirements of the test and stay program. So I was surprised that this was now in the executive order. So again, I've kind of outlined the parameters of what the program would be, and I think we need to now approach DOH and sort of say, well, what does that mean? Now, what I think it might mean, or sort of the what might not be such good news is that that RIDE and the Department of Health have a pilot program in Westerly. I'm not sure that it's even up and running yet. They were still in a very, I would say, embryonic stage of talking about it even 3 weeks ago. And so the modification of the executive order may have been to allow that, but more to come. I thought I was going to have relatively disappointing but definitive news tonight, and I found out, again, sort of looking at this order again, I had looked at it maybe 2 weeks ago, I'm not even sure when it was, pretty recently, and it looks like it has changed. So, more to come. And have you gotten anything from RIDE or RIDO?
Just what you mentioned, that Westerly would be conducting a pilot program. They hope to expand that sometime mid-December.
Okay. All right. So I think we need to find out from the Department of Health exactly what. I'll let you know when I find out. Sorry. Next slide. So some information about the vaccine rates in Rhode Island and Tiverton. In Rhode Island, as of this afternoon, 838,247 people have been at least partially vaccinated. Presumably they're going to go and get their second shot and become fully vaccinated. That's something north of 80% of the eligible people. It has not yet reached 90%, which is, and of course our idealized goal is 100%. In Tiverton, the number of residents who are eligible who have been at least partially vaccinated is 54.4%. And then Tiverton residents aged 0 to 24 years, so a significant number of those people are not eligible to be vaccinated, is a somewhat disappointing 32%. And then if you look at the other kind of cohorts, the ages of 25 to 44, 50%, 45 to 65, 57%. And of course, our elders have smartened up, and not that they weren't smart to begin with, and are greater than 75%. The interesting thing is that the Department of Health estimates that Tiverton's rates are probably 10 to 15% higher than they're able to report out, and that's because a number of people receive their vaccine in Massachusetts, and that's also true for Westerly, which, you know, I don't know, and why are they the pilot? Because they get their vaccines, some of them get their vaccines in Connecticut and some other towns. So anyway, I you know, part of the reason I'm doing this, I guess, is that I guess as a matter of personal interest, given that I live here and what I do and I'm on this committee, would hope that our rates would get higher. Next slide. So vaccines 101, I think I'm doing okay for time, but feel free to nod off. So what do vaccines do? They stimulate the immune system to create a response which can block infection when a person is exposed. It actually typically mimics the actual disease in the sense that it's your body's immune system that is responding to what's called an antigen in the vaccine, just as it would natural infection. Some vaccines, and this is, I think, of an important point. So some vaccines are made from live but weakened viruses or bacteria, and these vaccines have a chance of causing the actual disease or something like it. And examples of that are the MMR, the oral polio vaccine that a lot of us got when we were children, or yellow fever, which you're required to get if you go to certain parts of the world where that disease is still endemic. But vaccines such as the COVID vaccines, all of them, are made from particles or incomplete parts of a virus or bacteria, can never do this. So if you are afraid of vaccines because you're going to maybe get the illness, that's not possible. It is not possible. There's a few times that we say never in medicine. This is one of them. So it's not possible to get the actual disease from the vaccine. There's a school in Florida, a private school, that is actually requiring people to quarantine 30 days after receiving vaccine. So they have some very interesting ideas. I guess it's probably not the first and probably not the last time in history, but certainly a notable example of an instance where a school actually makes someone less intelligent. So there are no examples of, another really important point is that there are no examples of vaccines, and I've actually had a long discussion with a colleague of mine who's Dr. Penny Dennehy, who's an internationally known vaccinologist, and I was like, I could not think of one, and she could not think of one, and I cannot find one in the medical literature. There are no examples of vaccines which were found to be safe in adults, which were subsequently found to cause problems in children. So what does that mean? So we have used these vaccines for close to a year now in adults. Hundreds of millions of people have been vaccinated, hundreds of millions of people even in this country, and there really is no signal of any significant alarm. So while no one has a crystal ball or can predict the future or knows when Armageddon comes, the fact of the matter is there really is no example where you used a vaccine in adults, you gave hundreds of millions of doses, you saw what side effects you saw what reactions you saw, but there's no examples of where you didn't see something in adults where you then saw the same, you saw a reaction of concern in children. That's also coupled with the fact that these vaccines have been used extensively compared to many other vaccines that have been introduced or rolled out in the last 20 to 50 years. So we have way more data than we would typically have for vaccines, which we would have licensed and available to the public and available for routine medical use than we typically do. And then lastly, the other thing that this really means is that because these are not live virus or live bacterial, or there's nothing really live in the vaccine itself, the reactions a person is likely to have are going to be from some components in the vaccine itself. That is why when people have had reactions, it's usually been in the context of having had a vaccine, a reaction to a vaccine before, because the different types of things that are used to stabilize the vaccines are kind of common to vaccines. Having said that, these vaccines are pretty clean. There's very little in terms of the adjuvants or things added to the vaccine to stabilize it. So these have been compared historically, comparatively speaking, they have been very widely used, and there has really been very little signal that there's any concern at all. Next slide. So what is mRNA? So it's a part of the natural biologic process in all living things, including us. You have mRNA in you right this very minute, which functions to make new proteins in other parts of cells and tissue. So it's all part of our cellular reproductive process. The mRNA vaccines use a synthetic particle, which the virus would use in natural infection to complete its life cycle and reproduce. So the mRNA is the same thing as the viral mRNA in terms of its chemical structure, but it's just that single mRNA molecule. You need thousands of different types of mRNA molecules to build the viral particle itself. So I guess an example is the mRNA vaccine just has the brick. It doesn't have the cement, it doesn't have the plumbing, it doesn't have the wiring, it doesn't have the wood, it doesn't have the roofing that you would need to make the whole house. And then the mRNA in the vaccine exposes the immune system to the viral protein, which the mRNA then leads the muscle cells to make, which the immune system then uses to learn how to fight off the infection. So I've been trying to figure out how to explain that, but I guess you can tell me if I did the right job. Next slide. So it's the muscle cells actually that the vaccine is injected to. They make the spike protein, and then the cells of the immune system recognize the protein as foreign, and then they create an immune response against the spike protein, including immunologic memory, or the ability to sort of have a reaction months or sometimes even years later. Next slide. So this, I just want to really quickly talk about efficacy. So vaccine efficacy doesn't mean that it's only efficacious 80% of the time. When you say something, a vaccine has an efficacy of 80%, that means it reduces the number of infections by 80%. So it's a little bit of a misnomer in some regards. Next slide. I think I just said that. Next slide. So what about these Pfizer vaccines? So in the age 5 to 11 group, they were shown to be 91% efficacious for symptomatic infection. In the studies, there were actually no hospitalizations in that age group. And then in the 12 to 16 group, 97%, greater than 16, 95%. So that means there was a 97% reduction in symptomatic infection, 93% reduction in hospitalization in the 12 to 16 age group, and then 95 and 88% respectively in the greater than 16 age group. Next slide. The effectiveness refers to how the vaccine performs in wider populations. So what happens when you're not studying it anymore? Sort of how does it actually perform in the real world? Next slide. And it basically works to, in the 12 to 18 years age group, reduce the risk of hospitalization by 93%. If you looked at adolescents who had been hospitalized with COVID, 97% were unvaccinated, and there were no vaccinated adolescents hospitalized with COVID-19 who were admitted to the ICU. So even though it cannot prevent all infections, it is very good at reducing the risk of hospitalization and essentially an immunization, to coin a word, against actually dying from the virus. Next slide. So what about the adverse events following? It's very similar. The adolescents are very similar to adults, and children are also very similar to adults. The childhood dose is about is 1/3 of the adult dose, so it's 10 micrograms as opposed to 30 micrograms. It has the same dosing schedule of vaccine at time 0 and then 3 weeks later or some time after that, and there's been no evidence of this thing called MIS-C following vaccination. Next slide. There has been very rarely, and this has actually been only so far in children aged 12 to 17, of a vaccine-associated myocarditis. And it was a rare event, but it was most common in boys and in the age group 12 to 29. There were no cases of myocarditis that occurred in the clinical trials with the 5 to 11-year-olds, and there were 3,082 subjects in those vaccines that had at least a 7-day follow-up period. And that's important because that myocarditis generally has its onset within 72, 96 hours after the vaccination. Next slide. So, as with everything, nothing is 100%. I guess that's the only thing that is 100%, is that nothing is 100%. So breakthrough infections can happen, but as more people get vaccinated, we'll have fewer and fewer people come into contact with actual virus and continue to propagate the pandemic. So the only way through this really is vaccination. Next slide. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks for the full effectiveness. Next slide. Children in general have fewer side effects than adults or young adults, adolescents or young adults, and children with prior infection may actually have fewer side effects as well. So kids seem to swim through this vaccine pretty well, probably somewhat analogous to the fact that they don't seem to get this disease that much. Next slide, I'm almost at the end. So what are the side effects? You can have some local pain, swelling, or redness of the injection site, fever, fatigue, muscle aches, joint aches, so sort of like the flu. And generally speaking, they're pretty amenable to symptomatic treatment, but in general, we do not use aspirin in children under the age of 18 years. Next slide. So the possible risk of myocarditis, when they actually looked at the risk, again, mostly in males 12 to 29 years of age, and actually the risk of myocarditis or pericarditis after receiving the vaccine was much lower than that which is associated with being infected with the virus itself. In all cases resolved with rest and symptomatic treatment. Next slide. So that is the end. I'd be happy to take questions from anyone. I guess I'm supposed to call on you, right? Mr. Dakotas?
The only question I have is for children that have actually had COVID. Is there any guidance on getting them vaccinated, how long they should wait, et cetera?
You don't need to wait any time, and the recommendation is that actually this is true for all age groups, that if even if you have had COVID, because again, you may even have a breakthrough infection from naturally acquired immunity as you would get from the infection, that you still be immunized. And when they measure antibody levels, they find that the response is much more robust and longer lasting with the vaccination than it is with actually naturally acquired infection.
I guess that's the one thing I still hear is people say, well, I had it, so I don't need to get vaccinated, you know?
You're still rolling the dice. Do you have some immunity? Yes. One of the interesting things about COVID, though, is that or the coronaviruses in general, is that the immunity does tend to wane a bit. And so, the choice you're making is running the risk of getting it again, I guess.
Thank you.
Ava?
I have no question.
Okay. Mrs. Farnworth?
Dr. Larkin, I just want to thank you for your presentation and sharing with us your expertise.
You're welcome. Thank you. Mrs. Palish?
Mine's quick, and I hope everybody at work understands efficacious and myocarditis is the word of tomorrow.
Sorry.
No,
I was trying so
I'm
hard
good.
not to make this.
I'm going to impress
Medical.
everyone at work. Accountants don't use those words. Quick question, the PCR test for the test and stay, Dr. Sanquioni, I'm assuming that we will have that on site and we will be paying and administering that? Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so, sorry. So myocarditis is an inflammation of the heart muscle. And sort of realized I didn't explain that. All right. Any questions from either the internet or from our administrators?
Dr. Larkin?
Or you're an administrator.
That I think so. It may be a good time to mention to the public that on Saturday, we will be offering a clinic for all 5 to 11-year-olds, and parents can still sign their children up through the links that are on our website and through the emails that we've sent that information out. At this time, we have about 200 people already signed out,
That's great.
which is great to hear, but there are slots still available.
Okay, great. Good. Any questions from the public?
Dr. Lockton, there are no questions from the public, but I do have one if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you feel that getting the vaccination for ages 5 and up is safe at the local pharmacy versus a pediatrician, or it does not matter?
I don't think it matters. Pharmacists have, for more than 15 years anyway, been administering vaccinations routinely. I think in Rhode Island, though, they're still not allowed to give them under a certain age group, and I want to say it's 18. Do you know, Mike?
Yeah, that is correct. I think under 18, they have to go to their pediatrician.
But
don't
but
think
but you can go to ones in Massachusetts, and I believe both are safe. I guess you give the pediatrician the business.
Okay, and 1 second, there is something in the chat.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to read a question that's in the chat.
Okay.
And this is from a Candace Minette. Would you be able to explain the results of the 3,000 kids studied in the trial? Because you had stated that you don't get into how long the kids were looked at for once their doses were completed. And were any kids inexplicably dropped out of the trial? And then in addition to that question is children that are 8+ months out of COVID positive, and do they have higher antibodies than average, still higher antibodies than average?
So there's always some loss to follow-up in almost any clinical trial. And I don't have the number there, and I don't have the actual observer time. The trials began in, I want to say, February, March this year, and most of them were completed in June and July. It is generally, so actually that was another thing I wanted to mention that I forgot. So when I got my vaccine, so I sort of believe in this, I've gotten 3. I've had both my children, or all 3 of my children vaccinated. My wife's been vaccinated, so we're all sort of good with the vaccine. When I got it, I signed up for something called the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, or VAERS. And they, sort of like every day for the first week, and then it was like every week, and I actually just got another one. So you get a text asking you how you're doing and kind of monitoring you for symptoms or problems. So what does that mean? Well, it means a couple things. One is that we are continuing to, the CDC, the NIH are continuing to monitor what is going on with the vaccine as we progress through time, and have harnessed the technology we have available to us to have that information in real time so much faster than we would typically, sometimes take years before you might start to see some blip of data, and at a massive scale. So that's one thing. And to the question, the study subjects continue to be monitored as well. My wife actually got a vaccine through a vaccine trial, so she's continuing to be monitored. So there's no endpoint, at least right now, in most of the trials looking at vaccines. They get to the studies are designed in such a way so that statistically, that after you've enrolled this many subjects and have had this much time elapse, you will be able to conclude statistically that there's a significant difference, or what the difference is between the two groups. So the people that receive placebo, or sort of nothing, and the people that receive the vaccine. The vaccine trials are a little bit different in that they're usually what's called a crossover study, and that for the first round of immunizations, you have a placebo group and a vaccination group, and you sort of see what happens to the two groups, and then you switch them over and you give the placebo to the vaccinated in the first round, and then the vaccine to the people who are in the placebo, and that sort of kind of has a multiplicative effect in terms of your data collection. It's kind of a hard concept to understand, and I probably didn't do a very good job of explaining it. But the point is that there's an enormous amount of data, again, that has been observed already about these vaccines, which I think really speaks to their safety, and the results speak for themselves. If you look at one slide I don't have up here is a map of the United States, and it sort of shows you where there's intense transmission of virus right now, and where it's really seemed to have fallen off, and that correlates 1-to-1 with vaccine rates. So we're lucky that we're at a part of the country that there is high uptake of vaccine, and our numbers are not that high. So I hope that answered the question at some level. Something else I was going to say, but I forget. Okay. And any questions from anybody in the room, or any other questions on the internet or from our other administrators?
All right, so there's a follow-up.
Yep.
It says, you said it's a roll of the dice after COVID, not catching it again. We know the majority of children in this age group aren't horribly affected by this. I would say by rolling the dice is getting a vaccine, not recatching or even catching COVID to begin with. The studies 5 to 11 wasn't studied long. We have proof in these kids going on 2 years now. This isn't fair to have this being pushed on the young kids' recognized natural immunity.
I guess that's more of a statement than a question. And, my only real response to that is to try and educate oneself as best one can. The roll of the dice I was referring to is if you have had COVID and choose not to get vaccinated, you're rolling the dice of getting it again. That's the roll of the dice. Not, I guess getting out of the bed is a roll of the dice too. So, okay. Well, thank you for your patience. So we are on item 7A, FY20, nope, we aren't on that. We're at 6D, virtual participation at school committee meetings with a possible vote. Mrs. Farnworth.
Thank you. So I wanted to bring this up on the agenda tonight for a number of reasons. And I'd like you to bear with me for a moment as we get through the thoughts that I've had on this. We've been holding our meetings in person now since, I believe it was July. We, as was just evidenced by Dr. Larkin's presentation, we were aware that COVID vaccines for adults and children over 12 have been available for some time, and that would be the primary group of folks participating virtually in our meetings. We also know that COVID infection rates have been, I'll say, steady for some time and even declining. Our teachers, the students, our staff are all in person in our 5 buildings every single day. I know that the school committee has until now and will continue to, I suppose, at least until the executive orders are rescinded. We adhere to all the masking requirements during our meetings, as do everyone who enters our buildings. We've had little public participation via Zoom. Certainly no increase in that participation since we started running this program. The technology that we have in place here in the room doesn't always provide an adequate listening and viewing experience for the school committee members, as was even evidenced, despite the administration's best efforts. And I don't think it was ever meant to be in place for the long term. So as a result, I would like to recommend that we discontinue the use of Zoom for our meetings moving forward, and that would include the use of YouTube chat, and that we resume our meetings fully in person. That does not preclude the recording and playing live of YouTube. That I have 100% support for. So I'd like to make a motion that we discontinue the use of Zoom and YouTube chat for our meetings, beginning with the meeting of December 14th.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, open to discussion. Ms. Palish?
I'm way over here because I was trying to let you guys see. I actually have no problem with discontinuing the YouTube chat. I think that the taped video, that you can see it on video, it is fine. My only thing with Zoom is I wouldn't mind seeing that continued only for administrators that aren't presenting. I think that one of the things that technology has done and done well is we do realize that we can participate, and you don't always have to be live to do so. I think it's very difficult. Like, I really enjoyed having Mrs. Craven here this evening. I think if you're presenting to us, I like the administrators or whoever. I loved having the children here. I think I really would encourage, if you're presenting to us, to be here, but I don't have an issue with our administrators who don't have to be here but would like to be on Zoom or be available if the oddball question comes up. I don't have an issue with continuing that for them.
Okay. Ms. Pavo?
I also don't have a problem with continuing with what we're doing with the administrators on Zoom. My thoughts are this. They're in the schools all day long with the kids, and I feel more comfortable having them on Zoom for our meetings at this time, at least through December, maybe after the holiday period, than I would if they were here in person. It's a personal issue, it's a personal thing, a personal feeling, but I have no problem with them continuing on Zoom.
Okay. Mr. Dakotas?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to open up to any of the members of the community present in the room. And any comments from the public, Mr. Carnevale?
We did turn off the YouTube chat and put up a URL so that any participants virtually would come in through the Zoom. And that's where we were getting some of the chat information for this evening. But we no longer use the YouTube chat. That has been deactivated.
Oh, okay.
So it's only,
Well, there you
only
go.
Zoom, and that's the only way to participate currently.
Okay. And there's nobody in the chat, I guess.
There is in the Zoom chat, and that was brought up in the Zoom chat. But the YouTube chat is off.
No, but any comments about this item in the Zoom chat?
That was the comment in the Zoom chat,
Oh,
was
okay.
that we had turned off YouTube.
Oh, gotcha.
And it was also a comment by me, yes, but yes,
Yeah,
that
it
was
was sort
also,
of a-
that was
See, the
also in
third
chat.
time you explain it is when it sinks in.
I'm sorry, I speak tech, I know, I'm sorry.
That- not interesting enough, but could have been in a Fellini movie. All right. Any comments from our administrators on Zoom? No. I guess my feeling is we're going to get there, but I'm not sure we're there yet to sort of require people to be present in person, to either chat in the Zoom box or be present virtually. I think we will need to require it eventually, or kind of try and get back to whatever normal is at some point, but maybe the time isn't yet. I do think there is a benefit to being present in person, particularly if you are going to present something to us for that, kind of give and take and body language sort of thing. But my preference would be to still leave it to the individual to make that decision for themselves.
And Dr. Larkin, I then withdraw my motion.
Okay. But, I think we can continue to think about this and revisit it in the future.
Well, and I think certainly several of us have made it known that if you can be present, we would certainly prefer that.
Yeah, I think that's always preferred, but
Yeah,
I'm...
I mean,
I'm
especially
still-
since meetings all over town are being held live.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So next is item 6E, school accountability presentation. Dr. Sanquioni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to bring up a presentation to show you some of the results that our students produced last year as they went through a series of tests, depending on what grade level they were at. Do you have a clicker? Do you have a clicker? No clicker. Okay. So I don't know if you can make that chart out all that well at the bottom there, but it's an interesting graphic, and what it states is that there's a 2-year gap between the last time a grade had a full regular year of education. So if I focus on 8th grade, and you think about that, when they were in grade 5, they came to school every day and it was a regular school year. When they were in 6th grade, they got sent home in March. When they were in 7th grade, which would have been last year, they had an entire year, a hybrid, and a lot of different things, and a lot of precautions with education, and now they're in 8th grade. So it just sort of puts in perspective, as we look at results that were achieved in 2020, there was a year and a half gap of really education that it impacts these scores. So, the results are not surprising to us, as you see are written above there. They were administered after more than a year and a half of grade upheaval and academic interruption, with many of our students coming to school in person half the time, or not at all. And all the creativity and hard work that we put into distance learning, we It's no substitute for live instruction. And as we continue to look at these results, at the same time, we take these results very seriously. And as an entire administrative team, and now setting it out to our teachers, they serve as a powerful reminder there is great urgency to accelerate student learning and development. As we always do, we examine these results very closely, school by school, grade by grade, subject by subject, to gain deeper understanding of where we excelled and where we struggled, and to apply those lessons to our plans moving forward. As the commissioner said, and it was in my opening slide, these results now serve as our new baseline. I also want to share with the school committee, we did not wait for these results to begin putting additional programs and services in place to meet the needs of our students' academic, social, and emotional needs. And I won't read the rest of this to you, but you know we put some pretty extensive tutoring programs in place last year. We had some summer programs at all levels. We have tutoring programs back in place this year. We recognize that there are academic gaps and learning loss, and we want to try to counter-react that and work with our students as best we can to bring them right back up to speed as soon as possible. So take that all into consideration as we start looking at the data. We're going to start with the data at the high school, and I'm going to call Principal Craven up to sort of speak to you about what they've seen and what they're doing with this data right now to help improve instruction at the high school.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchioni. So bear with me as I go through a lot of different data and statistics, but what you see right here is obvious. Top 100 universities being ranked by U.S. News and World Report. And as you can see, our numbers are actually growing in this area. Mr. Carnevale is adjusting the screen, but at the bottom you'll see that last year in 2020, 5 students attended one of the top 100 universities, and this year, 2021, 7 students did. So I don't know if you can adjust that, Dave, at all, so that you can see the bottom.
You can see it.
Oh, you can see it on the screen anyway. Okay, perfect.
Oh.
The next slide speaks about the colleges with the highest number of Tiverton High School graduates attending in the last 5 years. We know that CCRI definitely, I'll wait for Dave to jump to his seat and get it up for you. As you can see the total at the top, CCRI is definitely taking quite a bit of our students, and they're going to, college and university that's free, or a community college that's free. However, these numbers also reflect the fact that a lot of students took gap years, and so you have to understand during a pandemic, the numbers are dramatically going to shift for various reasons. But in 2021, 19 students went to the Community College of Rhode Island, and you can follow the numbers all the way down that chart to reflect where our students are attending universities post-graduation from Tiverton High School. So we took a little dip here, again, for the reasons that I just spoke about. So 2021, the numbers dropped. Students attending universities made decisions to not attend those universities. People were going to spend the money attending those schools if it was virtual learning, gap years, etc. So that's what I attribute to that little dip that you see right there. But overall, we'll hopefully get that back up as we move into 2022. I'm next going to go into the advanced placement score reports. The next slide after this gives you an overview. We were on a pretty good upward trend. However, as you can see in 2021, that number dropped significantly. I'm going to go and spend some time on each individual AP score report with you this evening. I don't have answers for all of those scores. However, hopefully some of the data will give you some idea of why we face the challenges that we currently face. So 2D art and design shows gains in performance. We're above the national average of 3.5. The mean is 3.4. And we're also above the state average for a score of 3 or higher at 100%. Rhode Island average is 86.2%. And when I speak about that average, I'm talking about the number of students on the test who scored a 3 or higher.
So, and just to clarify, Mrs. Craven, so 3 or higher means that gives you college credit for the course.
That's correct. That's a passing score.
Right.
That's correct. AP Biology. So in sitting down with the teachers of these courses, it's interesting to get their perspective on what the challenges were over the past year. Because obviously I'm new to Tiverton High School. I wasn't living it at the time. And speaking about the challenges of an AP Bio course, obviously you cannot get the same education virtually when you're talking about teaching sciences, biology, investigative work, manipulatives, scientific tools. So the labs are very difficult to participate in virtually, and distance learning students did not have the hands-on opportunities that they would normally get in the classroom. And last year, 16 students were tested in AP Bio. 1 student scored a 4, 5 scored a 3, and 10 scored a 2. You can move on to the next slide, Mr. Carnevale. So AP Calculus, again, very difficult to teach mathematics over the course of the year, and instruction in mathematics is guided practice, right? Hands-on, students using processing partners to work together to solve problems. They need a teacher there. Virtual education isn't the same. So at-home learners, and talking to the educator, many took tests and quizzes at home. And teachers needed to provide more opportunities for students to learn and master the skills in person in the classroom. So 10 students took this test. 1 student scored a 5, 4 students scored a 2, and 5 students scored a 1. We were significant below the state average or percentage of students scoring a 3 or higher in AP Calculus. So Tiverton was at 10%, Rhode Island is at 50.2%, and the national percentage is 51%. So that's a significant drop. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do there.
So, Principal Craven, that average for the state was even with...
That's correct.
Okay, interesting.
That's correct. You're going to see that with a lot of the maths and sciences across the board. So AP Chemistry, 20 students took this test. 9 students scored a 1, 8 scored a 2, 1 scored a 3, 2 scored a 4, and no students scored a 5. Same as biology. Difficult to run labs and investigations virtually. Practicing skills is much more challenging from a distance, and critical thinking was definitely compromised in talking about how to teach chemistry from a distance. So, in thinking about what I just spoke and talked to, that score percentage. So the Tiverton scored below the percentage of students with a score of 3 or higher, as we are at 15% in AP Chemistry. Rhode Island is at 44.3%, and the national percentage is 51.4%. Moving on to computer science, 16 students tested, 6 scored a 1, 8 scored a 2, 2 scored a 3, and there were not any 4s or 5s. Students were disengaged. Coding's a very difficult process that requires a lot of collaboration and critical thinking skills. Tiverton fell below the Rhode Island and global mean of 1.75. The Rhode Island mean was 2.70. And in percentages of students who scored a 3 or higher, Tiverton fell at 12.5%, Rhode Island is at 55.3%, and the national percentage is 65.6%. AP English and Composition. 18 students took this section. 1 scored a 1, 10 students scored a 2, 5 scored a 3, and 2 students scored a 4. Language requires a lot of work in the classroom, literacy, Socratic seminar, etc. Breakdown of literary elements, a focus on synthesis and analysis. We weren't too far below the mean score in AP English Language and Composition. The scores of 3 or higher, our percentage was 46.4. Rhode Island was 59.7, and the national percentage 57.7. AP English Language and Composition, 10 students were tested. 2 students scored a 1, 2 scored a 2, 2 scored a 3, 2 scored a 4, and 2 scored a 5. Again, the mean for this group is 3. The Rhode Island mean is 2.86, so we weren't far off there. 3% of higher or higher in comparison, so we were at 60%, so we were above the state at 59.7 and above the global percentage of 57.7 for AP English Literature and Composition. AP Physics. Similar challenges that I spoke about already, speaking about the mathematical concepts, extremely difficult to teach virtually. 13 students were tested. 7 students scored a 1, 3 scored a 2, 1 scored a 3, 2 scored a 4, and there weren't any students who scored a 5. Disconnect of concepts obviously occurred. Application of knowledge versus regurgitation of information, AP Physics, I attribute that similarly to the difficulties they would have with mathematics, chemistry, sciences, etc. The percentage of students who scored a 3 in Tiverton is 23.1. In Rhode Island, it's 28.8, and national percentage is 42.3. Moving on to AP Psychology, tracking trends in reading data are currently being done in the professional learning communities because there's a lot of reading and analysis in AP Psych. And so what we've noticed is that, the students who are performing poorly in AP Psych also have poor scores in PSATs and SATs. So we're digging deep into that data. 10 students took this test. 3 students scored a 4. 1 student scored a 3. 1 student scored a 2. And 5 students scored a 1 in AP Psychology. The state average of scores of 3 or higher, Tiverton was at 40%, and the state average is 47.9. And then we have AP Statistics. We had a total of 37 students who took this examination. There's 2 sections. 13 scored a 1, 8 scored a 2, 13 scored a 3, 1 scored a 4, and 2 scored a 5. And so this was definitely a bright spot. So we were above the percentage of Rhode Island students who scored a 3 or higher. Tiverton was 43.2%, and Rhode Island percentage is 41.9. However, the national percentage was 57.9.
Mrs. Craven, can you just repeat how many students took that AP Stats?
AP Stats, 37.
Okay, thank you.
AP United States Government and Politics, it's one of the tests we want our students to be successful at. As I was explaining today, it's 6 credits upon graduation, and most colleges accept that 3. So if you think about AP scores as a whole in the colleges or universities that you're applying to, many don't take 3s, some take 3s, 4s, and 5s, but most colleges across the nation will accept a 3 in AP United States Government and Politics and AP US History. So it's an important test because it does give them a good head start in college. So 19 students took this exam. 6 scored a 1, 7 scored a 2, 4 scored a 3, 2 scored a 4, and no students scored a 5. The teacher who is teaching this has first year of teaching the AP seminar was last year. The AP seminar training program was canceled last year, so there wasn't a training program that this teacher attended. So in AP United States Government and Politics, Tiverton did fall below the national and state average, again, of percentage of students who scored a 3 or higher. Tiverton had 31.6%, Rhode Island is 57.6%, and the global average is percentage is 50.4%. In AP US history, small drop across the years. However, we're not far off from the global and Rhode Island average. 13 students tested in AP United States history. 3 scored a 1, 4 scored a 2, 4 scored a 3, 2 scored a 4, and there weren't any students who scored a 5. Where does that place us? Tiverton High School's percentage of students who had a 3 or higher is at 46.2%, as opposed to Rhode Island, which is 48.5%, or global, which is 47.2%. So this is the mean Tiverton High School and state SAT scores. I see this as definitely a bright spot. If you look at the mean, and if you're not familiar with EBRW, it's evidence-based reading and writing for the SAT English Language Arts examination. But if you look at 2020 and you look at where Tiverton fell for math and evidence-based reading and writing, we are here above the state average. So definitely a bright spot with our SAT scores. And moving on to middle and elementary data. However, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
Yeah, please.
I think it's important to know, like, what's happening moving forward, right? And so what we do in the school is we take this data, we disaggregate it, we meet as a group. The teachers currently in their PLCs have a data package. The department chairs are tasked with going through protocols of looking at data. They're then working on a slide presentation to present to their departments. Once they're done completing that task, all of the teachers within those departments will follow the same protocols. And then based on what they see and identifying the trends, they'll create action plans. We can't change what's already occurred. It's in the past, right? We just have to change the narrative moving forward. And those action plans will have actionable items that are measurable and windows of execution that have to occur throughout the year this year. So moving forward, we do have a plan in place. We definitely want to make sure our teachers are supported and trained in the AP seminar so that they have access to all of the materials. It's something I'm working on my end as well, because that one teacher who didn't have the training last year, obviously, it would be much more beneficial for him to have the skills necessary to teach the class moving forward.
Can you tell us exactly what the AP seminar is? Is that a sort of a, yeah?
It's a program for teachers to access the materials in order to teach the kids. So it's a training program for them.
Okay.
Just a curriculum.
All right. And then do they get specific feedback regarding content area that you know, sort of the kids that did? Okay.
Absolutely. And the resources are available to our teachers. Like, you have to think about, we're not teaching to the test. We don't want to teach to the test,
Right.
but we want students to practice how to take the test and work with each other on breaking down specific questions. If multiple choice question and answers are the struggle, right? And that's the data we're pulling right now. We're doing a question analysis. One thing that stood out to me for PSAT examinations was historical analysis in history. So you're thinking about timelines, charts, graphs. That's an easy fix, but a lot of our students were struggling when they answered questions in that particular category. So more emphasis on looking at that type of data in a historical context, and that will improve those scores in that area. But you really have to get deep into it. You can't, I mean, this is very surface level. I'm giving you data and statistics that are just numbers. It's really about the questions and the standards that we need to address in our classrooms that will fix what we see here today.
Do you guys, I'm sorry, Jerry, will you also?
No, go ahead.
Do you guys have any kind of data that correlates the scores on the AP exams versus passing grades in the classes? Do you look at that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something we're definitely, looking at, because it doesn't match, right? And so why does it match?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense.
So
And-
you're seeing that there's not a match.
Right, the student should be getting an A and then getting a 1 on the test, right?
No.
And I will say, as long as I've been on here and we've been looking at the AP scores, that has been consistent, that, we will see the passing scores in the class don't necessarily match the passing scores at the test. And it's, like you said, digging into and just, because it could be a great class and they're learning everything they absolutely, and I'm sure they're learning, but it's not translating into answering, the questions on the test.
Yeah, teaching to transfer is obviously what we always want to do.
Yeah.
We don't want them to just regurgitate the information so they spit it out for the sake of the
Exactly.
test. That's definitely a challenge. But overall, and I'll speak about last year. Many students were cheating on their AP examination. Some were allowed to take their quizzes and tests that were occurred during the year. They were allowed to take it at home, and there's really nothing that could have been done. So they weren't engaged as well as they could have been in the class itself. And then when they went to take the test, obviously they're not going to have success. But those are things that you learn, and moving forward, you definitely change. But that's just based on not my experience here. That's based on feedback I received from the educators who taught these classes.
And I know, and again, I know you're new at the high school, but I know there was a point that we really, in Tiverton, we encouraged everyone to take the EP classes, even if it's a stretch class. I'm not sure nationally or even statewide how that happens, but I know that was something that we wanted to do.
Yeah, as you should. Any student going to college should find the opportunity to take an AP class in their 4 years at Tiverton High School. It's a great preparatory experience.
So it is something we continue to.
It is
Absolutely.
it is recommended. NEASC recommends it. I mean, it's about equity, right? And you can.
Sure.
Every student should be challenged. Every student should have the opportunity to be challenged. Are there some students who are in classes that may be more of a struggle? Yes. However, we don't want to, cut them off and say, you're not capable of doing it.
Yep.
We want to say, you're not capable of doing it yet. And that's the mindset that we want to put forth.
I am a little surprised, though, that hearing in so many instances that we were below the state average, especially since we were one of the only districts and one of the first districts to be sort of in person as soon as we were. So I am a little, I will tell you, I am surprised by that.
So as are we.
So do we have, to sort of Deb's earlier point, is there data about sort of per capita participation, if that makes sense? Like, so a similar school of a similar sort of demographic profile.
We do have that data.
And
yes.
And are we an outlier in terms of, which I agree is good for kids to sort of challenge themselves and be taking these classes, but I'm just sort of thinking in my own experience, our AP classes were 5, 6 kids.
Right,
Not, people weren't encouraged to do that.
right.
So are we an outlier in that regard? Because that would explain at least some of the delta between, again, I'm surprised that we're performing that poorly vis-a-vis the rest of Rhode Island.
Right. We really aren't. As I stated, it is something that most high schools offer to all students. Years ago, yes, you had to have a certain
Okay.
score in one class in order to get recommended for an AP class. And that changed probably about, Dr. Sanquioni can attest to this, probably about 6, 7 years ago when, the question of equity came out.
Right.
And we were closing certain courses in schools and saying, you're not capable or you can't do this. But we don't stand out in that regard because we offer those classes. I think it's just what schools do now.
Yeah. Well, theoretically, it's only a year of difference if you're going to college anyway. So
Exactly.
that's something
Exactly.
you're capable of.
Right.
But there's clearly a lot of work to be done. But this is our new baseline, as Dr. Sanquioni stated, and I'm up for the challenge, and we'll get there.
That's great.
Sorry.
Mike, why don't you go?
Thank you. I just have a comment and I had a question. The comment is earlier in the presentation that showed the U.S. News World Report, the top universities. I think someone made a mistake. I didn't say Salve Regina in the top 10, right, Sally? Salve?
Yeah, yeah.
But my attempt at humor might have been funny, but my question would be, like my daughter's in 6th grade, how would you explain to her, or maybe someone that's watching that doesn't know what advanced placement is or why it's important or why we're talking about it, or even Dr. Sanquioni could explain if, I don't know if everyone knows the concept of it, what it is and why it's important.
Sure, I'll let Dr. Sanquioni explain that.
Thank you, Ms. Craven. So AP is a national curriculum, which means the curriculum is the same whether you're in a high school in Georgia, Texas, or right here in Tiverton, Rhode Island. And so every student is exposed to the same curriculum and is exposed to the same exam. And it's a very rigorous curriculum. It's a lot of work to go through an AP class. The idea is it sort of replicates the experience that a student would have in college. To Ms. Craven's point earlier, that's why we encourage. You saw 97 students went to a 4-year college last year. I hope every one of those 97 students took an AP class because that would have prepared them for that experience they're going to experience a few short months later. So it's a great way to gauge our students, again, nationally and against the AP curriculum that is vetted and created by experts. It's a very strong curriculum. So again, it gives us an insight on the mastery levels of our students and the teaching ability of our teachers. And as Ms. Craven says, when we see gaps and things, we're able to remediate those across the board for all students.
Thank you. I hope that there's one person out there that was scratching their head and I helped them.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you for that.
Dad?
Mrs. Craven, I noticed in your presentation there were very low numbers of students taking these tests. So I have 2 questions. First of all, was every student taking an AP class required to take the test?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, students who are, that is definitely something that schools, each LEA asks that students do. If you're going to take the class, you take the test. Now, some students cancel their scores. We don't have any control over that, whether or not they get their score report, and that gets reported to us. But they are required to take the test.
What does that mean, cancel their scores?
After they take the test, if they don't feel comfortable with the test or feel as though they were going to have success, they can ask AP to cancel their score, and it doesn't get reported to the college or university, and it doesn't get reported into our score report.
Okay. I also noticed you had 37 kids in AP Stats, which was robust, yet only 10 in AP Psych, and I know that traditionally was a popular one. Is it because perhaps of all the distance learning that kids opted not to go for the AP? I'm a little confused on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't have anything to say other than I wasn't here, so I don't have the historical information as to why students would not have signed up for AP Psych. It usually is one of the most popular classes, but AP Statistics, we had 2 sections. And AP English Composition, we also had 2 sections. So those seem to be the more popular ones. I don't have those answers. I apologize.
Okay. No. Well, I thank you, and I guess as far as my overall thoughts on this is, thank goodness it's a baseline. And
There
I
you
do
go.
wish you well in trying to help our schools do better next year.
Thank you.
Mike, I did want to thank you, though. You bring a perspective that's important. We forget because our kids are gone, grown, or that both, you have those young children. I know you have young children, and
Not so much
I do
anymore.
appreciate that because we do forget, because I've been on for so long and mine is gone, that it's important to make sure that that people understand like why we're talking about what we're talking about. So, I thank you both when you bring those perspectives.
Yeah, sometimes we forget. We use acronyms. We assume everyone is familiar with those acronyms, but not everyone is. So thank you as well.
My kids are getting old and cranky, so they're not so young anymore.
Additional questions?
Lauren, anything?
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay. Thanks.
So let's take a look at the middle school and elementary data. And this was from the RICAS test that was administered last spring. So we're going to show you, in the past, I've always shown you comparison of, for example, this test, and given you a comparison of different years that it was given. I've also shown you comparison when this test was given and how it's compared to how the students have grown in it and growth scores. I decided this year only to do one comparison, and that is to other communities. There's communities that border us, there's communities that are considered kind of community to Tiverton, and then with some communities that we aspire to. And I felt like that was the only fair comparison. I didn't think it was fair for me to show you the third grade ELA score for last year compared to 2019, 2018, 2017. So here we go, and there's some great results here. And as you can see in third grade ELA, you see where our three schools, how they scored compared to other communities. Doing quite well in third grade ELA. You're going to see across the board, and I want to make this point and thank the school committee. You may recall we made an investment in the Wit and Wisdom curriculum 3 years ago, and we are now starting to see the benefits of that. We're starting to see our students be involved in a very rigorous curriculum that has a lot of writing, a lot of reading, and I think that has really given our kids a rigorous and a great education. So you have the scores here for third grade ELA. We don't like the gap between one of our schools on the left side, and I'm going to show you what we do about that. So I know the graph is a little fuzzy up there, but this is a chart that all of our principals, then down to our teachers, are working on right now. X-axis is a question on the test, Y-axis is a score. Each line on there, the darkest line is the state. The other three lines that are going across are our three schools. So we benchmark our schools first against the state. We ever see one of our scores on a question go below straight level, we identify what that question is, what that skill concept is, where it was taught, how long it was taught, what was the depth and breadth, why didn't our kids master it, and what are we going to do about it. Then we benchmark our schools against each other. So for that one school that was a little lower, we want to know what areas there those students at that school weren't doing well. And the purpose then, you hear us use that term professional learning community, and that simply means we link the teachers who do the same job together. So we want our teachers who are teaching third grade ELA at all three schools to work together now to talk about what works best. How do we teach the concept? How do we teach a skill? How long do we teach it for? When do we return to it? When do we reinforce it? When do we hope the kids master it? So these charts are invaluable to us, again, to benchmark against the state, but also benchmark against each other. So we're looking, and I'm going to stay within a grade level here. So as I go through the presentation, you'll see ELA and then math for each of our schools. So here you go, third grade math, and again you see some exemplary performance there by a couple of our schools. Again, we don't like the gap with one of the schools on the left. I'll give you a moment to look at, and I'm not going to spend chart. You get the sense and the genesis of these charts here right now. They're all the same. I put them in the presentation because we're sharing this presentation with a lot of different groups. But again, the x-axis is a question, y-axis is a score, and we're benchmarking against the state and against our schools. We actually take these charts then and just do our schools alone with the state out, so we can really see where a question, a skill, a concept that wasn't being mastered in one area, so that our teachers then can talk about, well, at our school we did this, at our school we did that, and share that knowledge so that, again, so we can get those bands a lot tighter and that all our schools are going to be very successful. So we're moving into fourth grade now. And again, this is the ELA, students meeting and exceeding expectations. Again, we're having some amazing results. Again, I believe this is the impact of our wit and wisdom curriculum. And the same thing plays out, and there's that corresponding chart that goes with it. I'm going to go quick through these. Again, if you want me to pause, just say the word. And now we're looking at fourth grade math. And again, we see a pretty steep decline between one school there. And again, our work right now, we're going a little quick there, Dave.
It's interesting that they trend together, though, in the questions.
The chart you're seeing, I have to show you the blown up one when we just extrapolate out our schools. You'll see it there. This one you got too many lines there yeah. Yep. You'll see it a little greater there. So go ahead. All right. So we've moved into fifth grade mathematics now. And again, you see a solid performance by our school there. Again, this is meeting and exceeding expectations. And again, I think this is the byproduct of being in school last year. And so, I know a lot of the schools to our left, they did hybrid, they did a lot of distance learning, and as you know, by October 1st, our middle school, our fifth grade was in from day one, but all of our grades by October 1st were in full-time, full education in the classroom, and I think that's what's helped these results here. Go ahead, Dave. And yeah, move right up there. So now we're looking at fifth grade ELA, and you're going to see across the board in every one of our ELA scores, it's either to the right or solidly in the middle. But if I was to graph this back to previous years, you would see that there was growth in ELA. And that's pretty impressive in a year of a pandemic, that our scores in 2020 are higher than 2019, 2018, 2017. And again, I think that's the byproduct of really hard work by our teachers and the new curriculum that we have in place. So every time you see one of those charts, Dave, just kind of click through it quick. We've got the sense there. And so we're looking at sixth grade ELA, and again, you see it's solidly in the middle, but you see it's really a growth for us. We're moving forward with strong scores in ELA at the middle school. And then sixth grade math. Again, we're showing some good success there. A couple grades to go. Now we're looking at seventh grade ELA. And again, Dave, pause there, because this, to Mrs. Palish's point, if you go back to that line chart, Dave, here's you can see it. You can see it a little better when there's just a couple lines on it. And so I'll pause there just to give you a look at that. So when we do the elementary schools, we break them down with just a couple schools or just our schools, and we really can see the difference. So if you look at over there on the left-hand side, you can see, for example, question 4, 5, and 6, how Tiverton Middle School really nailed those questions way above what the state average was. And then you can look down a little later, and you can see that a couple questions where we didn't do so well, and again, that's the work our teachers are doing right now. What was that skill? What was that concept? When was it taught? How long was it taught for? What can we do to help our students master it at a higher level? Okay, so we're looking at seventh grade math now, and again, we're generating some pretty good success there. You can skip the line chart, Dave. And we're going into eighth grade ELA. Really happy with this score here. Again, it's on a trajectory of really significant growth. And again, when I think of eighth graders, I'm thinking they had wit and wisdom in eighth, they had wit and wisdom in seventh, they started in sixth, and I'm starting to see and we're all starting to see the impact of that curriculum, and again, most importantly, the hard work of our teachers to get kids to master these skills. And there's eighth grade math. So I'll follow on what Ms. Craven said. The important part of these results to us right now is to look at them, to celebrate our successes. We always tend to go right away to where we can do better. but I've said to the principals, look, we need to celebrate because there's a lot to celebrate there. But again, that hard work of disaggregating the scores, seeing the concept skills that we did do well on, continue to teach those at a high level, but also figure out the ones that need a little more reinforcement and get at that too. So I think we're on a great growth trajectory, and I'm confident we're going to stay on that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sanquioni. We'll open the floor to questions. Mrs. Palish?
For the fifth grade, Dr. Sanquioni, do you break that down to track from elementary school up? So when you're looking at the fifth grade versus just looking at all of them, I know once they get mixed together, it's harder to do sixth, seventh, eighth, but for fifth, do you say, where did our Percasset students do? How did it, you do still look at that? Okay.
Yeah, we do. We break it down every level possible. We break it down by teacher.
Okay.
We break it down skill, by question.
And do you stop doing that after fifth grade? Because I would think it gets harder because now they're all just a mass.
Correct. And then we still would break it down by teacher because there's different teachers at different grade levels. We want to make sure that we're consistent across the board, but also looking at the questions and the skills.
Okay. That was it.
Okay, Mrs. Farmer?
Dr. Sanquioni, did I not read in, I think it was the Newport Daily News within the last couple of weeks, an article actually showing clearly that Tiverton is one of the strongest school systems in Newport County where it concerned these RICAS scores?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, you saw some of those scores. I mean, on the right-hand side, some exemplary scores from Fort Barton and Ranger, both in mathematics and ELA. And when you combine those even as a district, our overall district scores were quite high. So, again, there's a lot, I think, that have gone into that. The fact we were in school, the fact we have a rigorous curriculum, the fact that we've been looking at this data for a number of years, that our teachers get to work in a professional learning community and hold each other accountable for these things, that are
Yeah,
the
me
great
too.
work. You know, I'm looking at our three principals there, and they all should be smiling because there's a lot to celebrate. And, you know, I commend them because they're the ones who take this data back to their schools, to their teachers. They have the data meetings, and they do great work with it.
Yeah, I think to your point, right, our ELA scores improved. We were the only district in the county who our ELA scores improved. And our math scores, while they declined, it wasn't to the same level as some of the others. And I think, you know, we do, as much as we're concerned over the continued development of these kids post-COVID, we do have to recognize that the Tiverton schools have done a good job.
Yeah, I thank you for recognizing that, and I echo that. And the middle schools showed some great gains, and you may have saw in the U.S. News and World Report, you know, Tiverton Middle School was ranked the highest it had ever been. I think it came in at 17th, and, you know, there's the principal for the last 3 years there, and I commend her greatly for the work she did there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Diane, because in the middle of absolutely atrocious circumstances and something they've never been through, and boy, everyone rose to the challenge. Wow.
They did.
Good point.
So you stole my headline. So how's it going?
You should have gone first.
I should have gone first. So I signed up to go to sort of a pre-release of data. They had a program at RIDE for a immediate ride for school leaders to come and kind of look at the data beforehand. And actually, I registered. I didn't really think too much of it. And when I got there, they were like, wait a minute, you're a school committee member? And I said, yeah, because I guess it was mostly supposed to be for superintendents and principals and things like that. And we spent 45 minutes kind of like wailing and gnashing of teeth and casting ashes over themselves about how the state has really done poorly, like there are significant drops in the RICAS scores. And then they let us get into our data, and I was actually pretty pleased to see actually, while they were sort of crying about how badly the state has gone, and it's every district, it's everybody, you know, the sky is falling and the world is coming to an end, we actually were up, you know, in ELA, and the math went back to where it was in, I think it was 1819, if I've got the years right, but it was still actually a little bit higher than then. So I also commend the students and the teachers and the principals and the administrators and the families for really kind of being successful at a time when, sometimes you can only succeed in one way, but you can fail in so many other ways. So that's my comment. Mrs. Pavo? No question. Mr. Dakotas, anything else?
I would just like to echo what some others have already said. So, Ms. Craven, thank you. Middle school's in good hands, but appreciate the hard work. The teachers should also be proud at the middle school. I know great things are happening there. And when I see things like this, I know that we're going in the right direction. We have some really good results at our elementary school, so kudos to our 3 administrators up on the screen. Your schools are doing great, and I have a child at Pecasset, another one that went to Pecasset, and they're both flourishing. We're doing great things. I have all the confidence in the world in all of our teachers in our schools, and so just wanted to say thanks. We're doing really well, and I have a lot of confidence, and I'm very proud to be here in Tiverton with you guys. Thanks.
And any questions on Zoom or from our administrators?
There are no questions at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay. Any comments from our administrators, Manny, Suzette, or Amy? Just want to smile. Okay. And from anyone present? Okay. So thank you. We'll move on to item 6F, approve middle school spring track with a possible vote. Dr. Sanchioni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For your consideration, I'd like to seek your approval for a pilot program for a middle school track program this spring. And here's the rationale for that. It's been a tough year for our students last year and this year. And at the middle school, in the spring, it's the only time we don't offer any activities for our students. And, talking and sitting and analyzing our budget this year, one of the things, which was a negative maybe can turn into a positive for us. The negative was we didn't have a lot of buses available to us this fall. The positive of that is we saved $13,000 because we didn't run buses for soccer, football, cross country, and so forth. And as I look at the middle school and those students there, to provide them a spring activity seems like a positive direction for us. Track is the kind of sport, it's co-ed. A lot of students can participate. We can get a lot of students out there. It really fits into that whole social emotional idea of getting kids, first of all, outside and getting to something that they truly can enjoy. The cost to start the program up is somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000. And again, we would do that off the significant savings we had this fall, so it would fit into our budget. But I just want to close by emphasizing it's a pilot. I'm not saying this is going to be in our FY23 budget for next year. A lot of that will make that decision based upon the revenue we have available to us. What I'm asking you today is just to approve it for this year, because I think because we have some savings, we get a gap in activities at that level, and it seems like the right thing to do when our kids have been through a couple tough years.
Okay, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll open it up to discussion. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes. So we need more spring sports.
Yeah.
Spring's a good time to be outside. I know for a long time, Tiverton Middle School has never had any sports, baseball, softball, field hockey, track. So I think it's great, and I'm fully supportive of it, and hopefully there'll be more to come. Thanks.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes, I'm fully supportive of it also. My one question is, where would they run?
Depending on the event, so whether if they're distance runners, they'll be on the roads, or not on the roads, but on the paths going around here, and then we'll use the track. We're going to have to coordinate this with our high school.
So we have to share the track
We'll have to
between
share-
the high school and the middle school?
Yep, and our coaches will know how to work that out, and we certainly recognize there needs to be a separation between our high school students
Right.
and our middle school.
That's all.
Okay. Mrs. Palish?
So my only concern, and we had a very long conversation about it, is when you have a $1.8 million deficit and you start talking about savings, why wouldn't you be using every dime to offset that deficit to put yourself in firmer financial grounds. And it is a balancing act, and we had a really good discussion about it. You know, we're still haven't come out of COVID. We're still, you know, our kids are, you know, it's still difficult. We still have masks. And to your credit, you have not come to us with anything else to use any savings that you've identified. And I do understand that you are simply asking at this point to pilot it so that we can have some relief for those students. And it is a small, you know, amount of money. So I am going to support it as well. And I do thank you for, we had a very lengthy conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Balish.
And I do thank you for that.
Mrs. Farnworth.
I think it's a great thing, especially since we had nothing in the spring. I will suggest we go back and review perhaps the ongoing viability of the soccer program, but that's a conversation for another day. And as it is a pilot, it's a great idea. Test it out. I have a feeling it's going to be popular.
We think so.
Okay. I think it's a great idea. Any questions from our administrators? Yeah, sure.
Proposal for a vote.
Come on up.
So last year, we tried to get this program up and running at Tiverton Middle School. And so Peter Sherman of Newport Propane did donate $1,500 to Tiverton Middle School. That's still in a student fund account at the middle school. So it's appropriate at this time to ask for your vote to accept that donation of $1,500 for the middle school track program.
Okay.
that's
I'm going to
fantastic.
ask for an amendment to the original motion, Mr. Dakotas. Didn't you make the motion?
Friendly amendment,
Diane,
Mike.
who made the
Accept the
motion?
money.
Diane? Oh, Mike, okay.
So I would like to make a motion, or amend the motion to accept the $1,500 from the Shermans and Newport Propane, and minus that off the cost that Dr. Sanquioni said to have the balance of, and approve that for this spring.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
So now we have an amendment to the motion that has to be approved before we take a vote on the full motion, just to kind of make sure we are, know where we are. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion? Opposed? Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Craven.
You're welcome. And I'd like to publicly thank the Shermans. I mean, they're one of our biggest contributors and supporters. So thank you, Jocelyn and Peter Sherman, for your contribution.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you. If you know of any other money anywhere, let us know.
Yeah.
So, any other comments or questions from administrators, those present or on Zoom?
There are no questions at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Passes 5-0. So, good job. Thank you, Dr. Sanquioni. We'll see how fast they run.
And that'll be, Coach, is that also Mr. Schreiner? Do we know that yet?
I know he's very interested in it.
Okay. So we are up to item 7A, old business FY22 budget. Ms. Roderick.
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. So at the last meeting, I was scheduled to present the budget to actual for September versus September of the prior year. However, timing worked out such that I was able to close October, give us some more current information, October of 2021 to October of 2020. So that's what I have before you here. This is the same format that I've used in other meetings. And it gives you an actual budget to actual by object code. Right now, we're spending consistently, like we did at this time last year, even with fronting some money for the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants. As of today, the ESSER 3 grant application still has not dropped from RIDE. We're expecting that at any moment, but that's not to say that that if it doesn't drop timely, we certainly can, move those expenses to the grant with a receivable for the cash and so forth like that. So that should not be a concern to anyone. Yeah, Dave, if you could just scroll down. As you can see, there aren't too many accounts as of this point that are overspent, although I do want to reiterate that we are expecting overages for fuel oil and electricity, almost of up to 50%, as you can, as gas and diesel prices have gone up, so will these as well. Right now, we are in a position to cover those, but I watch weekly. I run this report weekly, and just to make sure there are no surprises. In addition to that, I think I also mentioned at the last meeting we had an HVAC project at Ranger, and that's one of the items that currently is included in here, and I'm hoping, based on the language in ESSER 3, to potentially move that to the ESSER 3 grant, where it's HVAC. It certainly qualifies as COVID mitigation. So beyond that, I know you folks have had this for a few days, so I'm willing to take any questions you might have at the moment.
Okay, I'll open the floor. Mrs. Farnworth?
Just in particular with that HVAC project at Ranger, how much was that?
I beg your pardon?
How much does that cost at Ranger that you just referred to?
We've replaced the panel, the HVAC control panel, for about $39,000. There are some additional repairs to the units themselves on the roof that we have not yet undertaken, of about $43,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Balish?
Nothing on the specifics of the numbers, because we've been going through them sort of all along every month here. But Amy, when do you anticipate having the audit finalized this year?
So the audit work has
This
all...
looks familiar.
It does, doesn't it? So the audit work has all been completed as of this point. We have submitted our UCOA file to RIDE so that we can prepare the MTP report. So we're not expecting any extensions.
Oh, great.
We're expecting to file on time unless the auditors come back and say that there's a problem. But I did confirm with the audit manager this week, was there anything else that they needed from us? And they said no.
Perfect, thank you.
So, and it went very, very smoothly. I'd like to give a huge shout out once again to my staff. Everyone is just stepping up, and things, as the longer we're working together as a team, things are going more smoothly, and we're balancing out the hiccups. So it's definitely a whole lot smoother this year, and in much regard to the work that they're putting in.
Thank you.
Is that it? Mrs. Pavo?
I have no questions.
Mr. Dakotas?
No, I'm good, thank you.
So I have a question. So Ranger, I'm not sure that was in my random access memory. So what is that about?
So there is an electronic control panel for the HVAC system.
Yep.
That basically died altogether, and it had
Okay.
to be replaced.
Okay.
Okay, so we did that for $38,000. While they were doing that and looking at the system to make sure it integrated well, there were items for the actual HVAC unit that also need to be repaired.
I see.
Was that the 40?
That was the 43, yes.
Okay. And that money was not budgeted, or is budgeted?
It is not budgeted at the moment, no.
Okay.
And we have not yet authorized the repairs of $43,000 because I'm still looking for a funding source for that.
Okay. Mrs. Craven? Do you have I was just wondering if you had some money somewhere. Okay, so I guess we'll hear more about that in the future?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Any questions from Zoom or administrators or anyone in the room?
No questions, Dr. Larkin.
Okay. So then we're up to item 7B, FY21 budget update.
So to Mrs. Palish's point, so she had held up before a report from the auditors that was our budget to actual. And it turns out that for FY21, we actually have a surplus of 500 and, if I can read this correctly, about $36,000. And that was mainly due to our special education expenses. In years past, we've had special education expenses that, you know, have far exceeded our budget. And in this particular case, we have expenses that were far less than we expected. Part of that is because I was able to move a considerable amount of those expenses onto the IDEA grant. Initially, I had anticipated us being over, so I took that overage and moved it over to the grant. And then at the end of the year, as we were getting the invoices in from all the out-of-district providers, initially, Newport County had estimated that we would be paying, how do I want to describe it, for every day for every student, whether they attended or not. And it turned out that through the course of the year, they only charged us for the days that the students actually attended. And when I was speaking with Newport County, they too were expecting us to have to pay for every day for every student, whether they attended, and it came out to be that was not the case. So we were able to see a significant savings of about $1 million in that line item, offset by some other overages that we had. In addition to that, also related to special education, we received a refund of our 2020 expenses. So they had an audit, and it found out that they had a substantial fund balance, and that was returned to us, or our portion of it, on June 30th of this year. So that was $300,000 that was not expected. And again, that was subject to that was pursuant to the audit that they had of their books. And the money is not theirs to keep. They return it to the respective communities. So that was the 300 and so thousand that we listed there.
Okay.
I'll stop there for now before I go on to the next page for questions.
Why don't you go on to the next page for now?
So this is a draft of one of the pages in the financial statements. That's our formal budget to actual. And I wanted to point out that, as you can see, sort of 3/4 of the way down the page, the $536,000 surplus for the year. However, due to conservative spending by everyone in the district, as well as the windfalls that came unexpectedly, we did not have to draw down the $400,000 of the fund balance that we had initially anticipated. So if we take that plus our surplus, our anticipated fund balance at June 30, 2021 is expected to be just over $1 million.
That was 4 months ago, though.
That was 4 months ago, correct.
So this is basically closing out the FY21.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Open the floor to questions. Mr. Dakotas?
No, I don't have any questions, but thank you for the thorough review. Obviously, this is positive, so we'll take it.
Mrs. Pavo?
I have no questions, but Amy, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thanks.
Mrs. Palish?
So that's like, what, 2% of our budget? Am I doing that math right? The
No, it's more than
526 is 2%-ish, lower than that, maybe 1.6% of our $33 million budget, which, my only question, and you probably don't have an answer, is our special ed just is so spiky. It's just, it's so frustrating because it can flip positive this year, and then as we've seen, it can just totally go the other way next year. I just don't know have the business managers been speaking to like the state about this, because that is like our biggest And
That's-
I got to imagine it's an issue statewide that, it's very, very difficult to budget for. It's very, very difficult to get a handle on because, like you said, we have, $1 million surplus, but we've seen it completely go the other way.
Correct,
And now
it could
it's
have gone
gone.
the other way, yes.
So is there discussion at the state level, Amy, about trying to, them to get a handle better on supplementing it somehow or just leveling it out or not really?
So I'm not aware of any discussions at the state level. It has not been brought up amongst my fellow business managers. However, I do know that, like everything else with the funding formulas and so forth, other districts do get more assistance with their special education than we do, based on, I guess, the General Assembly and what they had decided in the past. And again, initially, we were expecting, close to, a few $100,000 overage, and even Newport County was expecting that. Well, and
I know it's a function of who the students are, what the need is, and
Correct.
it's just super unpredictable. But I think that's the part that frustrates me is because it is so. And by the way, this is not a ding on Miss Krieger because she does a fantastic job. She works with us. She tries to give us information as soon as she can when she knows that things are going one way or the other. It's just, I don't know, it continues to just be a frustration because it's so, and I'm sure for you, it's really just so hard to budget around.
in this particular case, though, COVID had an impact on it in terms of also in certain circumstances, the dollar amount that would we normally be charged for in-person services was somewhat reduced for virtual services to the extent you can provide virtual services to some of these children. Mm-hmm. So that, there were, this year, 2021, was an anomaly on many levels. I wouldn't expect to see this sort of savings going forward.
So when you budget, you won't budget those savings because you know what caused them and they're going to flip out.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And it's not, I'm not offering any solution. I do apologize. It's just, it's a frustrating,
And again, it is based on, the students who are residents of Tiverton, and that could change at any moment.
And we're glad, and we embrace, and we want to give everyone services, and like I said, Sarah does a great job. It's just, from a budget perspective, it's one of our hardest things to really get a handle on, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Farmer?
I have two questions.
Sure.
One for you and one for Mrs. Plush, because I think you'll probably know this, unless Dr. Larkin, you know it. Have we received refunds in the past from Newport County at all, in your recollection?
We have drawn down. I don't know
No,
that we
no,
received.
no.
That's Medicaid.
Yeah, we've drawn down Medicaid, but I don't recall
No.
ever.
Well, I think it sounds like this is related to COVID, where they said the kids weren't
Yeah.
there, therefore you're getting
In
money
2020,
back.
okay.
Yeah, I don't ever
Yeah, I
recall
don't- never.
seeing a refund.
And that was for FY20.
Right, right.
She did allude to a yet-to-be-determined amount of a refund for FY21, although she said it would be significantly less, so I'm not counting on that to be of much assistance. But she says she's expecting a similar situation for 21.
Okay. Could we please get a copy of their audit for FY20? I know
Is-
21's not out yet.
Sure, can do that.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you, Amy.
Are you welcome?
And always, special education financing continues to be a fascinating topic. All right. We're up to item 8, announcements, scheduled meetings, reports. We have a meeting next week on Wednesday, starting at 7?
Correct.
Right. We just don't have the time. And then we are not meeting on November 23rd. And then our first meeting in December is the 14th.
So just for the public, November 17th is executive session only. There'll be
Yeah.
no open portions of that, other than just opening the meeting.
I think you want to add one agenda item, I believe, Dr. Larkin, for open session, accepting of,
Peter?
conferring with your chair there.
Yeah, so we have to formally accept the allocation of the,
Okay, that,
so we'll do that.
we will gladly.
Yes.
Do
So
that.
That's
And
a small
and just
item.
for, this, no cameras, we don't need.
No, we don't need any.
nothing like that, okay.
visual. All right, any other announcements?
Dr. Larkin, on our December 14th meeting, which would be our only meeting in December, Dr. Sanquioni, can we get on that agenda, the annual meeting schedule for 2022?
Absolutely.
Okay, you gonna ask for motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any
We're all having
opposed?
so much fun, apparently.
All right, we are adjourned.